Hey, everybody, welcome to the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave. I'm joined here with my co host, Greg. And today we are recording again in the morning, as we've been
Mhm.
doing. And it
S-
feels different in the morning, I think.
Slightly less chipper, I
Yes, I
think.
think that's it. I think it's
You
harder
know,
to get that early morning chipperness. You gotta force it a little bit, but
you gotta force it a little bit.
if you fake it, you can make it.
Yeah, and I agree. And also, it's the subject matter, and we have to address, we rarely miss a week. And I thought, maybe being a little bit candid and giving the listeners an explanation, maybe it's some insight into my own life and what like I've kind of gone through the past couple of weeks, and more importantly, like what my family has gone through, which has been really tough, and to just share this with them and Dave, because you're obviously
Mhm.
one of the closer people in my life and someone who I feel like I could probably bounce this off of. Because to be honest, if you and you do know me, Dave, you
Yep.
you know that like I have not talked about any of this or
Sure.
shown any kind of sort of vulnerability, and hopefully I don't weep upon our listeners.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm gonna try my best because there's something that's like we're gonna be talking about grief today, but we're gonna be talking about it. We'll talk about the way we usually talk about it after I sort of go through something that happened to me because I think it just makes things a little bit more real, and it kind of highlights a couple of things. One being, death being a wildly common part of life that we kind of all avoid,
Yeah.
right? It's like that one thing in life that we all know that's going to happen to all of us, but we don't really believe it. And it's interesting.
Yes.
Also, addiction plays a role in this. And when I talk about addiction, and when we've talked about it in the past, and I kind of bring up the idea that like imagine everything in your life that's important to you. Imagine your kids, your job, your car for some people, your goals, your sense of self, like whatever that's driving you, whatever that makes you you. When it comes to addiction, cross all that off because now you're just living towards that addiction. And when Dave and I talked about dopamine and the hijacking of the reward system. This is one of those stories that just highlight it's that those aren't just words. I will say, and this is a story, Dave, I don't think you've heard. And maybe you've just gleamed whatever through us being friends for the past however long we've been friends for. When I was in high school, I was in very much attracted and pursued this young lady who had an infectious laugh and just like this kind of like bright little spirit, like fun-loving person. And paths drifted, and I went off to the Navy and did all these things, and I came back, and years later, we kind of reconnected. And she was the same person, same fun person, and we were young, and we get together, and we tried to make things work. So like, we had two kids together. We were living in a house together, building a family together, and I had no understanding of addiction, and I had not known like when I was gone that she had kind of like gotten into that world a little bit.
Yeah.
But and when you're young, somehow
And
you're
when you
able
say
to.
you were gone, you can want to explain that because you were
Yeah,
gone
so
for
I
a
was
period of
gone, meaning
time.
like I went away to the Navy for 4 or 5 years. I kind of
Mhm.
lost touch with everybody. And when I came back, I just kind of assumed things were just the way they were, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What
And
was your
so
communication like with her during that time?
none, none. I actually like was very much involved in another relationship. And, when that didn't work out and I ended up being just back out there, I ran into her very organically because there was no apps or anything like
Yeah.
that, right? And we just kind of like, oh my God, got to talk, and things developed from there, and there was no turning back. And it developed into, a multi-year relationship, obviously. So I noticed things though when we were together, like she would work at night, and then like the restaurant would close at like 10, but she wouldn't come back till like 2 in the morning. And I was always kind of like, this is so strange. Like, and I didn't want to be that person that's like, hey, don't do this, don't do that. But it just felt weird. And, we had kids together, and this didn't, I thought we were young at the time, and it kind of never went away. And it got to the point where like I started understanding what was going on, and there was ultimatums, and we did have kids together. So like I tried and I tried, and we ended up calling it quits, and I ended up taking the kids and starting off on my own, right?
Yeah.
And that was hard. And that was hard.
Yeah.
And that went on that way for a while. Just watching from a distance her kind of make choices that I was like, I couldn't understand. I didn't understand that she was driven by something that wasn't her anymore. And, you know, I would try to help, and I would give her money or like put her up places because she was losing contact with family and friends. And, this is someone who had like more friends than I ever could think of having, right?
Yeah.
Just like a social butterfly, close relationships with their families. But as these things started to like fall off, I kind of was trying to help while I could. But then it got to the point where I was in another relationship, and like years had gone by, and I had to start making a decision like to keep helping her or to just focus on the boys in the future. And that's what I did.
What, if you don't mind sharing, what
Yeah,
was
please.
the addiction to?
So that's interesting because I know that through her friends and through like learning later on, it was like a cocaine addiction. But obviously, these things sort of develop, right? You find yourselves in different groups, and you find yourself in a position where like that drug isn't doing what it used to do, and maybe there's more. And I know there's like different there was different paths. I just out of respect for like the person, I don't know for sure, but I can safely assume that there was more than just that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The look started changing, and just really a sad thing. And years went by like that.
Mhm.
And it got to the point where this person was kind of unrecognizable, not really v visually, but definitely personality wise. Things had changed quite a bit. And there was a lot of distance, and it got to the point where she wasn't seeing the kids very often, maybe like once a week, maybe, but sometimes months would go by, right? And there was all kinds of trouble and core and this and that and the other thing, and things just kind of developed like that for a while. But I always kind of at this point, speaking the last couple months, assumed that at some point things would turn around, and she would have one of these relationships like you see on TV with the kids and the mother, or like the kids and the father. They had a tumultuous relationship growing up, but they figured it out, and they kind of bonded and understood each other and had some insight, right? And
Mhm.
like a worthwhile relationship. And so recently, um, I was at work, and I got a phone call. And it's funny because like my son's name is Mick, but his real name's Michael, but we call him Mick, and always have. And I got a call from the Coventry Police Department saying, "Hey, we've got Mick here. I mean Mike here." I'm like, "Mike? Do you mean Mike?" And so like I that was a message, and so I called right away. I was in the middle of a session, and I was like, because I'm thinking to myself, why is my 9-year-old son at the Coventry Police Department when he should be,
Yeah.
10 steps down the road at school? Um, and it ended up being her father, and they ended up telling me that like he wanted me to be called, and to let me know that like the boy's mom had passed away.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just sat there in that moment, and I was like, what like I couldn't really wrap my head around like what I was hearing. And then started having a lot of like guilt, like what could I have done? Should I have done more? Should I have if I had given this person a hug, would she have broken down and completely changed? If I had made it a little bit easier, because it started to make it difficult with the kids, where it was like going with her wasn't benefiting them in my mind. I knew that she loved them, and I knew that they loved her, but like she would pick them up and then drop them off a couple of hours later. She wasn't supposed to be driving with them at that point,
Hmm.
but she would anyway. And the father would pick them up, and then she would drop them off, and I would be like, "You're not supposed to. It's dangerous. It's not, you're not supposed to do that." So I just kind of started limiting everything, and everything was like piling up for her, I think, with like getting in trouble with this and for that and for other various other reasons. But it for me, like it's been such a confusing thing, because this is on one level, like this person that I knew that I loved, like died years ago. But watching the pain and like not fully understanding and the finality of it on like the faces of my kids when I had to explain to them what happened is really devastating. And when I tell you that like this person used to be, I mean, universally loved. Like there used to be like there was so many people where you couldn't go anywhere and her not know somebody.
Yeah.
And to have people send me a newspaper clipping from the medical examiner just a few days ago, just to add another level of sadness that no one had kind of claimed her body yet. And if they don't by a certain time that, maybe I would be the responsible one to do that, um, is really just devastating. It's almost made me feel like if you're gonna get into the drugs, you're lucky if they kill you young. Because if you let them take everything from you, I mean, it's an even sadder sort of scenario in a
Right.
sense,
Right.
you know?
So, Greg, let me ask you this question. You got the news and
Yeah,
you're at work. You're mid-session, like you said.
mid-session, yeah.
How do you continue? Did you go
Luckily,
in? Did you explain? Did you just say, "Oh, I had that was an emergency call. I got to take care of that after this." What do you do?
so I was with a person who I had been with since I started doing this stuff, a person like he's an autistic gentleman, so you're gonna get the truth from him and you're gonna get
Hmm.
the real sort of insight. And I just had to let him know like what like it's a kid. He's not a kid anymore, he's an adult, but I started with when he was a kid. And I just kind of let him know, like, oh, look, I just got some bad news, and it was actually really like a really genuine sort of empathetic response, which I was, you know,
Yeah.
um, just a little surprised about.
Hmm.
I wasn't sure if he had quite the capacity for that, but it felt as empathetic as possible because he knew he was able to kind of like pick something up in me, like
Yeah.
something had shifted in that moment. And, so after he left, I just kind of like kept going with the sessions for the rest of the day, which felt heavy. But I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was the right move. Like, I even went to work that night, and I don't know if this was the right move, but that was on a Tuesday. We didn't tell the kids till Sunday. Oh, Saturday, because I didn't want to tell them and have them go back to school. I didn't know how much time to have them take off. I wanted a little bit of a buffer, you know, and I still don't know, like, going forward what the best, you know, the one decent thing as far as the kids goes is like nothing changes. They weren't staying over there. They don't have anything over there.
Yeah.
You
You
know
had
what I mean?
mentioned one had a closer relationship with her
Wh-
than the other.
Which yes. So the youngest one was about. So there's two, and one was 9 months when the split happened, and so he kind of doesn't really remember a time where like the norm was having two in the house like that,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And the older one kind of does, and always had this pull, this, you know, he's just more of like I don't want to say a romantic, but this hope that, oh no, this time's gonna be different. This time she's gonna show up. This time it's gonna be better. And because she was always like with the words was there, but then the actions were lacking sometimes. And I almost feel bad talking about it in that way now that she's gone. But that's just the truth. That's just the way it was. And I don't blame her. I just think that she got to a point where she wasn't able to fight it anymore, which brings up another sad kind of idea with the whole thing is, there's no, you know, there's when people are doing these, illicit substances, the danger is really high now, with like fentanyl being a thing and everything.
Hmm.
And what gives me a little bit of peace is I think that there was just a mistake there. I think that there was some drugs used and then it was too much and that was the end.
Right. So
Of
there's no idea that this was like an intentional
course I thought
thing.
about it, Dave, with
Right.
everything compounding. I thought about it, but I have to say, in all honesty, I think that there would have been a text message to my oldest,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, and some kind of goodbye in a sense,
Yeah.
right?
You got to
Which
think that with some of these with like drugs over time, it does a damage, it does wear and tear to the body. It's,
mhm,
it's increasing your heart rate by like 1,000, then like having it go back to baseline, then doing it
mhm.
again and doing it again. You got to assume that at some point the heart could just go out.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. It takes
it's,
it takes and it takes and it takes from you.
I think that, from your sons and your oldest, if like this is something he's able to comprehend, one of the hardest things is going to be trying to figure that out. Like, if that's a thought that he has, like, was this intentional? Was this an accident? Just, yeah, just trying to figure that
Y-
out.
The thought I'm scared of is like, why weren't we enough, you know, to put it down and to fight? Because the reality is, everything was taken care of. It's not like I was relying on anything. If she wanted to go and figure things out and take months away, that was there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That, and I've said that in the past, like all you have to do is go, figure it out, and come back when you're done. That's it.
Yeah.
And it just I think maybe on some level people think, and we all think, like, I've got time, you know?
Yeah. I also think that, like, for some people that drive to engage in those substances is just so overpowering
Mhm.
to the point where, like, I don't think us who aren't struggling with
Can't
addiction
understand.
can even fathom how strong it is. Like, I have, my next door neighbor goes back and forth from sobriety for like 10 days to, basically debilitating alcoholism. And like, and for like the longest was like 2 months probably, like every single day. And I'm like, what stops him when he has those 10-day breaks from just like continuing that? What is
Will,
it?
like will,
Right,
right?
right. And he like,
And it can't last.
and I see him because he like it tries to engage in activities. He makes home projects for himself that he never finishes, and they're horrible. It's like digging up his driveway and then just leaving it all winter. It's like crazy stuff. I'm like, that drive to drink must be so crazy strong that I can't even
Oh,
understand.
and I think with different substances it's worse.
Yeah,
Alcohol is insidious in its own ways, but I think when you have, like we talked about before, when your dopamine is literally driving you to the
yeah,
substance, there's no more dopamine driving you to your children, to your
right.
work, to anything else. That's gone. Just erase that.
And
It takes from you. And you
yeah,
need, that's why you need rehab, right? You need space away from it, almost in a protective, like to protect you from yourself, essentially.
it's tough too because some of these substances make you feel on top of the world,
Hmm.
or like whatever is lacking in you suddenly comes out, right? It's like, with cocaine, it's such it's an upper, so it's such like a social
Hmm.
drug.
I feel like myself again, you know?
Yeah, or I feel like greater than myself. I feel like I have so much more than I've ever had as far as like personality or ability to talk, or just feels, something I've never experienced before. And then that drive to like get back there is the thing people always talk about. So they engage more and more and more.
Right, but I think over time, what happens is you remember how it made you feel. You remember how good you felt, and I think you get to a point where it's just you're chasing that
Yeah, that's
feeling,
that's it. Chasing the dragon,
right?
right? That's what they always say. It's you there's that
But you never quite get
idea.
it.
No, there's that idea of what it could be, but it's
You
almost
never quite get it.
unattainable. Yeah.
And that's dopamine. The motivation towards something that could be. And like, like almost like that's what keeps you motivated towards a dream, and then your dream is gone and your dream is drugs.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's
So
sad.
so Greg, like,
Yeah.
obviously this story is tragic, and we've had conversations on here about substance use and
Hmm.
all that, but I mean, I think the thing that you really wanted to talk about today was kind of on the opposite end, and that's the grief part
Right.
experience that the friends, the family, the loved ones, the children, the partners, what they all experience, right? And kind of like the universality of all that.
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, it is. It's something that we all go through, right? And I think it's important to talk about because that very reason is something that we all go through on some. If we haven't gone through it yet, we will go through it. Um, and we can talk about it in the lens of the five stages of grief, like the Kubler-Ross model.
Yeah.
So those are denial, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Anger, if I didn't say it. These stages, they're like the
Dabda,
frame.
is that really they
Yeah,
made
DABDA.
the
DABDA, of course. So, because we need always an acronym in the medical/mental health field,
how
right?
come it's not like Bada?
It should be something. They should just leave it alone. The five stages, they should call it. And all these are just like it's a framework for understanding like emotional reactions to loss. But it's not linear, it's not predictable, and people
Yeah.
experience these
That's
in
that's
different
important.
orders,
That's
right?
very important for people to understand.
Yeah. And something new for me is what, like I said, watching my kids feel it and kind of go through this and see it externalized. And I think to myself how unfair it is to have to carry such a heavy burden at such a young age. It just seems unnatural. Like it's unnatural for a parent to bury their children. It's also unnatural for children to bury a parent up until a certain age. You know what I mean? Well, like people under 10 years old shouldn't be burying parents or having to understand that
Not
or
in
think
this day
about
and
that.
time, at least.
Right?
I'm sure
I
in
know,
like,
I know. I know this isn't fucking no one's going to the mill now
yeah,
to
right.
kind of make ends meet, but
This
it's
isn't the
tough.
Oregon Trail, it's different times.
It is different times. It's less common,
Yeah.
certainly, but it does happen, and I want them to know that too because you mentioned universality. I want them to understand, like, hey, look, even though it might feel like it, you're not the only ones going through something like this.
Yeah.
This is something people share.
And the interesting thing about this is, you know, from studies of, grieving people's brains and, measuring like stress and hormone cortisol that's released during the grief process, all that shows that there's no difference in, whether you're black, white, Asian, any race, any age, any religion, it's all the same. All cultures grieve. They all feel some sense of loss, sorrow, despair, anything like that. It's just that we all, like we said, experience it different and demonstrate it differently, which I think is super important because, coming from, the other world that I exist in with that, working with individuals with disabilities, it looks significantly different in that population at times to a point where it's like you may or may not understand what is going on. It could come out significantly delayed. It
Mhm.
could come out in challenging behavior that makes no sense in relation to what they're experiencing. It's all very different, but we're all experiencing it to some degree, right?
Absolutely. And Dave, like, why don't you take us through like a little bit of the breakdown of each stage, just to kind of give us a little insight in each one, what it looks like.
Yeah. So for DABDA, we
Mhm.
got the first one being denial. And denial is best described as a temporary defense mechanism that buffers the immediate shock of a loss. It's characterized as being by a feeling of disbelief or not being able to process the reality of the situation, like, oh, this isn't really happening. Or, you might hear the expression, actually, I can't believe that so and so is
I
gone.
know.
That's a
You might
common
al
one that I hear. I think I say that all the time too.
you might also hear denial isn't just a river in Egypt.
I think I heard that on like the Jungle Cruise, Greg.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
No, but it's like a dissociation sort of idea, right? We're like I'm that's kind of when you go to that moment with me in session, it's sort of like I dissociated that. It's like, okay, well, let's just pretend that didn't happen
yeah.
and get through this for a little bit.
It's really interesting because that's one that I feel pretty strongly. It's like when a loss first happens, you almost go through a period of time where it's like things almost are like you're like shocked that life is still going on as
Yeah.
normal.
You say things like it hasn't hit me yet.
Yes. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's definitely one that I've said 1,000 times
Mhm.
over. And I think like since last November, I've had three or four, pretty significant losses. And like for each one, it was like a varying degree of that.
Yeah.
Um, and one I shared on here, like my neighbor across the street who I was friends with, he passed from brain cancer, and it was like a kind of a slow, but I guess in the scheme of it, it was kind of a quick process as well because it was less than a year that he, kind of suffered from it. But even today, I'm like, it's so crazy that he's gone. Like it just feels so wild that he's just not here anymore. And it's like that denial of like, could it be true?
I know.
Is this like, did I dream that? And this is, months and months later, it still feels that way. It's a very wild experience in some ways, but also very like heartbreaking at times
It
too,
is. It
because
is
like,
heartbreaking.
because you do have to remind yourself that yes, it's true. And that's a hard thing to like process and tell yourself.
Tell me about it.
Anger is another one. The it's so when you kind of come to, right? Or for some
Mhm.
people, this might even be an early onset feeling that you get. You might start to feel anger. And I think a lot of people get confused by this emotion when they lose someone because it's not one that they typically expect to experience all the time, depending on the situation, I guess. Uh, this could be directed at yourself, it could be directed at others, it could even be at whatever religion you believe in. It could be at that higher spirit that you were praying to, and you're so upset that that loss happened that you're saying like, why did you take him from me, or something like that.
Mhm.
It's normal and it's healthy. It's an expression of the pain and the frustration, and just how significant the loss was, I think, for you. But that's one I see in pretty frequently.
Yeah.
Or like you'll start to see people. I think this is where sometimes even like the family issues can start to arise because like people start to point the finger, like, oh, you should have done this or you should have done more. I understand like that's not helpful, but it is a
Mhm.
natural thing that I think people start
There,
to.
there seems to be a lot of should always,
Yeah, I
you
think, and
know.
I really do think that's just people trying to process, right? They're trying to process what happened.
And
Um,
trying to make themselves feel better about their
sure.
own mortality too, where it's like, oh, we could have done this. Next, like, could have done that. Like, as if in some way this was preventable by,
One person's actions would
yeah,
have saved
right.
this entire situation, and on a whole, for the most part, that's not usually the case. Bargaining is, so in this stage, you may try to negotiate with a higher power or fate, or make promises or deals in an attempt to undo the law of the loss, which is an unfortunate thing, that reality that's not possible. Depression. This one's often marked by feelings of profound sadness, emptiness, hopelessness. It's a necessary period of time, I think,
Mhm.
to kind of process. I think this is when the loss really starts to feel real, and you really do start to like understand the significance of it to its full capacity. You might even think about aspects that you hadn't thought about previously
Oh yeah,
that
and once
suddenly are
the
gone.
dust settles, yeah, you start to think about things and
Small routines, things that remind you of the person, ways that, I miss when I would see that person at this place, when I would go there, and now I'm never going to see them again, things like that.
and for me it's a strange thing because there was a lot of resentment and anger and like it's almost like I went through these processes already, for this person, for me. So it's different for the way like the kids are going through it. Because I th I tried all these things. Like in the beginning of this, like I tried all these things, and the depression was there too. But then it did get to a point where it was, the acceptance, which is next, obviously, kind of comes through, and you just kind of say to yourself, like, there's so many great quotes, and we'll kind of get into these stuff about like acceptance and grief, which I really feel help. But really, it is just this thing where it's this is painful. This is going to be with me, and this is hard, but
Yeah.
this is, you know?
Yeah. So you mentioned acceptance, and it's not necessarily like a happy stage to say, but it's kind of coming to terms, finding a way to move forward, processing it, understanding it fully, and just deciding that, all right, this happened. Not that I want to forget it, but I do need to continue living because I know that's what this person would have wanted for me. And I think that's, for most people, that's like the final stage, I guess, that you would go through. Like we said, they're not always linear. You're not always going to experience all five of these. I think that's important to note too. So, there's no like perfect way to grieve.
Hmm.
If you were, it would probably, if there were a perfect way, it would probably be these five in order, I guess. But
Yeah.
many people don't.
Grieved perfectly.
Like, I'm going to be honest, I don't think I've ever gone through maybe I've gone through a bargaining, but like not significant. Like I can't even think of times I was like, I'll do this if I could just have, well, no, I can actually envision that statement maybe
Yeah,
being
because
made
it
at
is
some point.
because that's part of it, Dave. Like the idea that like it's such a hard thing to say, like, wait a minute, like I'll never see this person again.
Yeah.
And I think that's why like spirituality plays an important role with like if you have that in a grieving process, because it's like if you can genuinely believe that you will see this person again, that's got to be helpful, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say so. So for some, I think we feel some of these stages harder, or there's aspects of grief that can be a little bit more challenging than others.
Hmm.
I see people that just can't get out of the anger stage, and that really bothers them because like they don't want to be angry. And they'll say things like that. Like, I'm not someone who does well with anger. I don't like anger, but I can't get past this anger. For me personally, the regret that I often experience
Hmm.
of like, oh, I should have done more. I should have visited more. I should have been more involved. Like that for me is always like the thing that I can't get
Yeah, why isn't
past.
that one of that's for me too. Like I
I
actually
wonder if that's part of the denial or the depression.
I don't know. I think regret is like should is its own category.
It
I
should
really
be
feel.
because it's so significant. Like or at least the way I experience it, it like to me, regret is like all of it. Like, and maybe that's just because of whatever our personal relationships have been to certain
Because we
people
all
that
say, should
are,
I have tried a little bit harder? Should I have
yeah.
done a little bit more? Should I have been around a little bit more? Should I have said something differently? Should I have not said something? You know,
Yeah. But
it's all
like
difficult.
with all of this, all of these stages are important, I think, for a reason, right? And that reason is you can make meaning out of the feelings, you can make meaning out of the thoughts, and you can learn how to live differently going forward.
Mhm.
And like, so with regret, if you have regrets about something that you didn't do or something you feel like you should have done with someone, um, you have to move forward and make sure that you don't make those same mistakes with the other people that are in your circle that are important to you, right? So like taking that feeling and turning it into, all right, well, I can't go back in time and change this. But what I can do is ensure that I don't feel that again with, this person. Um, I can make sure that I spend more time. I can make sure that I check in more frequently. Just things like that. Or I can make sure that when we're together, we're actually spending time with each other and not distracted all the time.
Mhm.
All those things.
Yeah, and also there's something that comes up for both of us when we talk about, honoring someone,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And because the reality is, when if I pass away or something like that, the last thing I want is for people to be angry and depressed and all these things. You genuinely want people to move on and be happy. Like that's what you want and try to be. Don't like wallow. That's what you want. And so how would this person want me to behave? How would this person want me to react to their death? And like let them in on it a little bit because I there's few people who would want everyone's life to kind of be turned upside down because of their passing. They would
Yeah.
want people to kind of pick themselves up and move on, right? I would
Yeah.
think.
So for me, just to share like a quick like anecdotal way that I've kind of done this in my life is so when my grandmother passed, she was an important person in my life. And um at that point I was kind of feeling stuck with a lot of things. And it really kind of made me think like, I would use her passing as a way to say, like, when I was faced with challenging decisions, that would be kind of like my motivator to move forward sometimes. Like, this would make her proud if I did this. And
Hmm.
I did that even more so, years later when my grandfather passed, because I know what like he valued and I know the things that he thought would be important in my life, and I know together they would have been proud. So like actually when I made the decision to go to grad school, a big piece of that was, well, first of all, they left a small amount of money that made going to grad school even possible for me,
Hmm.
because couldn't really afford it at the time. But making that decision, which I had been mulling over for years, was fueled by like, I know that they would want me to do this. I know that they would be proud of me for doing this. And that's kind of was like my whole motivation going into it. And the thing that got me over that hump that I just couldn't do for years. I wanted to do it for years, didn't do it. And I'm glad I did it when I did it. Like, it was the right time. Everything
It was
seemed
the
to
right
fall
time.
into place. But that was the motivator that ultimately got me there. And I'll use that with a lot of decisions in my life. Like, I know that they would be proud if I did this. I know that like this is something they would want me to do. And I try to like find that with everyone that's in my life that's significant that I've lost or even that's still around. Like, that's always a good thing to think about in general. Like, what would make the people that I care about proud of me and things like that. Not that you want to live your life for others all the time, but like, I think it's important sometimes to like, if that's something that makes you feel good, having people in your life proud of you, use that as a motivator to take the steps that have been really hard for you to do. So
So it's an interesting thing you say there, and it's like that the instinct is to automatically for us all to say, I don't want to live my life for others. But is that, but maybe you do. You know what I mean?
in
And like,
some
so like if
aspects
you
you
get to
do.
the end of your life and you're like, oh man, I did all this great stuff for me and I felt great and I did this and I did everything. I'm so proud of myself. But it's like, yeah, but what did you do for other people? Because that's the best people who I've ever known did live for others, did do for others before themselves. And I think that's what makes, I don't know, I think that's what makes life meaningful. Like, and that's what I'm seeing here. And it's like, anytime you see someone who is doing for themselves and not thinking of others, it's tragic and it
Yeah.
ends in tragedy, ultimately. So it is about kind of getting out of your own way and getting out of your own, because that's what you have to sort of transcend your own needs and wants and desires and kind of focus on what's good for everybody. I think that like that's how
Well, yeah. And also you want to move forward in a way that feels good. And for so many of us, the people that are most important in our lives, their views of us make us feel good. So
Yep.
if we can make them proud, that's a great feeling, right?
Mhm.
Like, going the opposite direction and doing things that makes all those people you love not proud doesn't feel great.
Right, right.
So
I
why would I
know.
not want to like try to make them proud? They're going to accept you and love you no matter what. But if you do something that you wanted to do and it also makes everybody around you proud of you for doing it, that sounds like a win-win.
It's almost another way of looking at the thing that I always say is like, how do you be someone that the people you love would admire?
Yes.
Instead of just how do I be someone I would admire,
Right.
which is important. Like, but like, finding out who you admire is and behaving in a way that they would admire is not a bad sort of framework, I don't
Yeah,
think.
I agree. I agree. So that idea of honoring, sometimes I'll frame it to people as like paying tribute,
Hmm.
um, and also just living life with intention. And I think that's something that I've had to really, and I'm sure Greg, you can relate to that. Like, you learn that from losses, you learn it from those moments that you can't undo. Like, how can I do this differently so I don't experience this again? That regret becomes that driving force that you're like, I don't want to ever feel that level of regret
Hmm.
again. I remember my grandmother was in a nursing home for a long period of time. And, I visited her not nearly as much as I, in hindsight, wished I had for
Hmm.
a variety of reasons, just being young, naive, not really understanding how quickly Alzheimer's can progress, not really understanding that there was a very short period of time that I would even be able to do so. And then after it was done, I was like, wow, that was a mistake.
I
So
know.
you
Trust me,
you
we've all been there. And because when you're young, you think ultimately of yourself and what's
yeah,
good for you.
right.
And that has its consequences.
Yeah, so you start to live life a little bit more intentionally, and I hope that, that's something that people can all start to do a little bit more with the people around them.
So I want to get into a few quotes here because I think that they're useful to people. Quotes have always been useful to me, and I think that sometimes it's either like a metaphor or a quote really frames things in a different way to your subconscious and kind of really it digs itself in a little bit deeper than just, you know, if you're talking about it in a non, I don't know, sort of poetic way. So Queen Elizabeth said, "Grief is the price we pay for love," and that's true. I don't know how helpful that is, but that's true, right?
Yeah.
Like we it's something that we sort of sign up for when we have people that we love in our lives. We are signing up for that. That's why I don't have another pet because I'm not signing up for that again.
Yeah.
You know, because it's a tough grieving process. Another quote that I really love is this is Jamie Anderson and it's grief is love with no place to go. Oof, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah, it's
mean,
a tough
just
one.
to think of that is that's exactly what it feels like. It's like this hole in your body where there used to be love, and what do you fill that with?
Right.
You know, and C.S. Lewis says grief changes shape, but it never ends. So that's another thing that's really heavy and hard to think about, but it's true. It's like these boys and myself and her family, we have to carry a weight and we can't let it go because it's always going to be a weight that we have to carry. But as we carry it, I suppose what we can do is get stronger, and we don't notice it as much that we're carrying it anymore, and we learn to value what we carry. So it's making me think of something I bring up when people lose people. It's I always tell them what's really hurting you right now, like these memories, right? These thoughts and these memories of these great times that you've had with this person. Um, and I ask them, would they be willing to give them up? You know, would you be
Mm-hmm.
willing to give up your memories with this person? And the answer is like always no, of course, because they cherish these memories, but they're also the same things that are causing them so much pain.
Right. It's like
You know?
that. I think we talked about this maybe in the heartbreak episode, but the whole premise of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, it's, erasing the memories you have of this person. When you think about the things that hurt you, it's like you just wish those memories would go away. But like ultimately, if you don't have those memories, there's a big void because you've grown so
Mhm.
much, or you've experienced so much with that person that you would be a different person if you didn't have those memories.
Right, like and that's almost like something I've heard in the past that says the pain passes, but the beauty remains, you
Sure.
know? The
Sure.
pain will pass. One that I really like, and this is like an unknown sort of quote, is grief is like the ocean, it comes in waves. Sometimes the water is calm and sometimes it's overwhelming. We just need to learn to swim. And I think ultimately what's the hardest thing about grief is this idea that you can't say the things that you wanted to say. You can't see the person one last time. That's the most heartbreaking thing that my son said is like I just had like a couple more things I wanted to tell her. And it's you know,
Yeah.
you can, right? Like you can, I guess. You can say it. If you're spiritual, you can hope that like you'll get a chance to reconnect. And I think on some level I have to believe that. I think on some level if you lose something significant enough, um, you almost have to become spiritual in a sense if to me, not to everyone obviously, but it certainly kind of helps move forward, you know?
Yeah. You know, I think saying goodbyes when we don't, so losses that happen without that ability to say goodbye, I think are so much harder at times than those losses when we're able to say goodbye because there's no closure, right? But
Yeah.
also, not that beyond that, there's no closure, there's no ability to just say the things you want to say. I know some people have a hard time, like with when someone's at end life, like wanting to go see that person, but like I always encourage it because I think like that's such a beautiful way to be able to like give that person the send off they need and also tell that person everything that they mean to you or anything that's left unsaid. So there's nothing left unsaid, right? If you get
Hmm.
that opportunity, I always encourage people just take it and use it because it's a beautiful thing that not everybody gets. Like for Greg, like what you're experiencing, unfortunately, there was no closure.
No
There's
clue.
it's flooded with questions. It's flooded with should haves and I wish I, had done this and all that stuff. And I'm sure that like, for your son at some point when like all the he wraps his head around everything, I'm sure there's a lot of things that he's gonna wish he had been able to say. So, if you get
Yeah,
those experiences, if you get those chances to be able to have, contact with someone in their end, take it. And that like I guess all it just all comes back to like don't leave any situation with regrets if you can help it.
I agree. And it's almost impossible, but and also give yourself some grace and understand that like if things weren't great when someone passes, if you were, maybe you were fighting, maybe you said something you didn't mean, because that happens a lot and that can be really hard. They know, right?
Yeah.
People know your intentions.
You know, you just brought up an interesting thing too, is like sometimes our last interaction with someone wasn't great. And then we almost have to suffer
Mhm.
because we're sitting here thinking like I don't know what they thought of me before they went or what like all those things like I wish I could have told them this and um yeah and that's like you said you got to have some grace and you got to understand like like nobody's judging a whole relationship on the last interaction they had.
No,
Maybe in the moment when you're fired up you are, but like as a whole no one's saying like that entire relationship is trash because of this one argument we had or this one thing. Like relationships are far beyond just the one argument that like got in the way, right?
I 100% agree. Because I think there was a little bit of that with them, the frustration with her for them.
Yeah.
Especially with the little one. I think he probably has some regret because he stopped going completely. We just let him make that choice after a while.
Yeah.
And then before we get out of here, Dave, if you want to get have a little cry, the three um movies for grief for me, actually not even for me, for per the internet, and then I'll say the ones for me are Manchester by the Sea. Have you seen this, Dave?
Oh yeah.
I mean, sorrowful, complete, like tragic. And of course, the opening sequence in Up will always be something that's really heavy and hard. And Coco, that's a couple cartoons. But for our sort of generation, Neverending Story,
Mm.
heavy.
Hmm.
Bambi was heavy. And My Girl, and even Harry Potter in some ways. Have you ever seen What Dreams May Come with
I
Roger
was
Williams?
literally going to
I don't
bring
know.
that up. I
Yeah,
was going to bring that up. That's
that
one of
is
I
to
used to love
me.
that movie for whatever reason. Yeah, Robin Williams I think was so amazing. I haven't watched it in years. I wonder if it still holds up to like my remembrance of it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I used to really like
Me
that.
too. I thought it was like beautiful in that a love could, I'll follow you into like whatever, into the subconscious, into the afterlife,
Yeah.
into whatever. Like I'll find you and I'll pull you back out. That's just an amazing story. Love all that.
City of Angels with Nicolas Cage, I kind of remember as being something I used to connect with a lot around grief and I wish I could remember like exactly why it stuck out to me so much, but that was one and I don't know if that has the best reputation. It might have been a little cheesy, but for whatever reason, my mom loved it and we used to watch it like on repeat when I was younger.
My mom loves Steel Magnolias. We used to have a couple cries about
There
that.
you go.
I mean,
There's a
it is
few
what it is.
darker ones too. I don't know if you've ever seen a movie
Beaches.
called Beaches. Oh, I don't know if I've ever
The
actually
Beaches
watched.
was really good.
I don't know if I've ever actually watched Beaches all the way.
It's
Um,
good.
in the Bedroom. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Had
Mm.
what's his name, Tom Wilkinson. But I remember it's like there's two parents that are grieving in that over their I think it's over their son or something, and that grief just felt really real for whatever reason. And there was one other I was going to bring up, but I can't remember. Maybe it was What Dreams May Come.
There's one called Ghost Story.
Oh yeah, and I've been meaning to watch that because that's another one with Casey Affleck, I think, and I haven't watched that. but
I haven't watched that
that was on
either,
my
but
list.
it kept popping up, and I think like maybe that
Yeah.
would be an important watch.
Yeah. So, you know, watching films about this topic can feel um, really heavy at times, but
Mhm.
also can help us visualize and connect with others. And I think that's why it's helpful because we
It's
like see other
cathartic.
people
Yeah.
going through it. We can feel it. We feel it as they're going through it. It's like, yeah, I think it's helpful because I when you're in it, it almost feels like nobody understands you. And I'm just gonna put this out there because you said it. The loss of a pet is one of those really interesting things too, because you feel like nobody gives it the
Gravity.
emphasis, like, yeah,
Yeah.
the gravity of, but like in so many ways it's just as significant. For some people they might even say more, or they might, it's, but it's a significant loss. And like I for some people they're very connected with their pets. And then like I've shared on here, I was like going on 1 year in November, and like that loss, like I just cried about it last night actually. I was just
Yeah.
thinking about
Yeah.
the day that it happened for whatever reason, and it's like it's still super strong. And I've seen some people posting recently about it, and I was like, oh, interesting timing since I knew we were going to do this. Um, and just how significant of a loss it is. So like I don't want people to feel like, oh, you should never like put gravity to a loss. Like you should never like what am I trying to say?
Like a
Rank
hierarchy,
losses, a hierarchy of what's
you
supposed
know?
to be more meaningful or than others. And like you never know sometimes too. Like sometimes a loss can happen, you're like kind of shocked by it. Or sometimes your initial reaction and your eventual reaction can be different too. Like it's interesting. But I just encourage people, with any relationship in your life that's meaningful to you, or if you've had those friends that were close with you and you've had falling outs, like, you know, consider these things. Consider, well,
Mm.
if something happened, how would I feel if I didn't get to say certain things to them, and try to make sure, like, live life a little bit more intentionally, I guess,
Yeah. Live life for others in a sense.
in a sense. Yeah. I don't
All
know,
right,
Greg.
Dave.
Is
I
there
think
anything
that
else you want to say about it?
I know, I think that's it. And I appreciate, like giving me a place to kind of like talk about talk, about this a little bit and let the listeners know that like, we apologize for not being here last week, but it was sort of significant thing
Well,
that was happening.
and Greg, before we wrap up, just for you, like
Mhm.
on the same thing, like don't feel like there's a scale of how you're supposed to feel,
I
because
know. And
I
it's
know that
and
it's tough. Like you have your kids,
I've been allowing
obviously.
myself to, because honestly, the first like, well, the first couple days were like fine, like almost like the denial thing. But then like there was a heaviness for a few days, and maybe even up until, you know, I felt like starting to like kind of break a little bit. But like you said, it's cyclical, up and down. It is like waves. It does like sometimes like it's gentle, and sometimes it just washes over you pretty heavy, and you don't know what to do about it. But to me, I'm not pushing it away. I'm not, avoiding it. I'm gonna let myself feel it, and because if I don't let myself feel it, you can't really get past it. And I'm hopefully, you know, looking at some ways that people grieve and seeing, some pop culture where people are grieving kind of just helped me like wrap my head around a little bit.
Did you write about it?
I didn't. Typically I would, but I didn't. And I might. But that's the thing though, Dave. Like I have years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I years ago
I
I've
find it
written about
helpful.
this.
I find it
Yeah.
helpful. So I wrote my girlfriend's grandfather, who was like a father to her, passed away last month, I think it
Mhm.
was. And I was really close with him as well. And we had the funeral for him, and she asked me, would you write for something for him, and say it in front of everybody. I'm like, oh my god.
Okay.
but I but I was actually really glad she did, because I was going to write something anyway. I just wasn't planning on reading it in front of everybody. And it was so cathartic to write it
Mhm.
and to be able to speak about him in that. And also it felt weird though, because I was talking about my relationship with him in front of like his family members. I know he viewed me as family, but like I'm not blood, obviously. So to like talk about my relationship with him as if I'm a family member felt a little strange, but it was like one of those experiences where I was like really glad I did it. And it felt good to get some of that off my chest and to like speak about this person in a way that like I felt they deserved. And, Greg, maybe that's something you can do. Just put some words to it. And, not just the thing that's prohibited her from being herself, you know,
Mm.
in the more recent years, but the thing that drew you to her in the first place.
I think
And
that's the idea, right? Like
yeah,
for the boys don't really have to know that story now. What they need to know is there's a person that loved them and
yeah.
this is who they were.
Hmm.
I think that's what's important. Um,
This is what the world thought of them before, things got in the way.
mm.
And this is why they were so valuable to, to me and to all the people that love them. And this is, what they presented to the world. And this is what they brought to the world. Yeah.
And also let it be a cautionary tale for those who addiction is a will take it all.
Yeah.
It will. So that
Yes.
that'll do that.
Yeah. We've been meaning to do the grief episode for quite some time. We had
We
a
have.
a, a colleague that had multiple significant losses that we had wanted to have on here, and I hope at some point we still do because her story is one that is super valuable about resilience and how to make meaning out of like what we've been talking about, but like her story of making meaning out of their losses is, I think, just inspiring and
Hmm.
helpful to others and for mothers who have experienced loss and wives that experience loss. I think like I hope we end up having that after all because I know we put that, just planning it was hard, but this topic is definitely obviously one that's important for people. So yeah, Greg, thank you for sharing and being willing to talk about your personal experience with it, and hopefully others can find value to this topic.
I hope so.
And even if you haven't experienced a significant loss yet, at some point it is inevitable. I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but like
Hmm.
just start to think about that stuff. And, like I said, don't try to live a life where you have minimal regrets. If you can help them and stop them from happening, take those steps. All right. Yeah. All right. We'll talk to everybody next week, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to that's why I'm having trouble ending this. It's hard to land it smoothly and just say,
Yeah.
well, have a little joke or something. But like,
Yeah.
see you next week with a more
See you next
with
week.
the
Yeah.
with a sunshiny topic, hopefully, or slightly more sunshiny.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you, and we'll see you then. Bye.